We continue to take a look at different kinds of worship. First one is contemporary worship, which has been out probably a good 30 years plus by now. And really, what you're doing there in a nutshell is you're taking traditional worship, getting rid of a lot of the litanies, the responsive readings, and you're putting current music in its place. It's really about what you're doing. Contemporary worship was one of the first worships in this last, like I say, 30 or so years that came out. And I don't want to use the word opposition to traditional, but perhaps that is a good word. It was one of those things that developed because people of my generation and younger do not want to do what their parents did or do. So if your parents went to church and you were dragged along into traditional worship and you don't want to be like your parents, then you look for something else. Uh, you can see this in the marketplace if you're not sure you agree with me yet. Uh, Oldsmobile, how many of you own an Oldsmobile? Well, my grandfather owned an Oldsmobile through his life, and my father refused to own an Oldsmobile. He instead bought Buicks. I will not drive a Buick. To drive a Buick means that I am old like my father was. And so on it goes. So contemporary worship, it's the same type of worship, except we get rid of the litanies and we get rid of the responsive type readings and we bring in modern music. That's where you'll see bands or some kind of other form of music being played. That's all it really is. There's nothing else fancy or schmancy about it. It can take many different forms in many different ways. Depends on the church you're at, whether you do have a band or not, what people like. Multisensory worship is another kind of worship. You don't hear about it too often. And when I talk multisensory, I'm also going to tell you that the things that you can do in multisensory can also be done in contemporary, in traditional, and in other worship styles that you may come across in your days. Multisensory means that you're going to try to touch as many of the five senses as you can: hearing, smell, taste, touch. You're going to try to hit all of those. So here's an example of multisensory. Let's say you're going to have communion on Sunday. Again, traditional, contemporary, it doesn't matter. And you have a large sanctuary, so you get, let's say, 6 people to bring in bread makers. You mix up all the ingredients for the bread, and you set the timers so that those breads will be in the baking phase when worship starts. So the smell of baked bread or baking bread will be in the sanctuary during worship time. Of course, if you're going to do that, that's a great time to have communion because people will be thinking, bread. You can do the same thing with, we of course use grape juice in the Methodist churches, but you can do that too. You can take the aroma of the grape juice and put it out into your sanctuary. So what's happening is while the communion is going on, excuse me, not only can they hear the prayers, they can also smell the elements. And of course, you have touch, where they're going to have to pick up a piece of bread and dunk it into the juice anyway, or that's intinction, or however you're going to serve the elements. That's touch. That gives them an opportunity to be involved there. There are many different ways that you could involve multisensory things in your worship. The more you can put in, the better. Sight and sound. Sight is good, like during the preaching time. If you can use different video clips or movie clips or whatever kind of clips. Or PowerPoint, just having slides up there that are changing. You be careful, don't go too crazy. We'll talk more about those later. But anything that'll entice the five senses works. It's also an understanding that people learn and process information in different ways. There are people that are going to process auditorily, meaning they're going to hear the word, they're going to process its meaning and understand it. But then there are people that are visual people that need to see something to understand it. And then the third type is we have the kinesthetic type person who has to have the touchy-feely, make them feel good moments. Understanding that people gather data in their through their senses in different ways, and the more ways you can touch their needs, the better the worship will be. Take a look at the questions below. Take a moment to discuss them if you're in a group. If not, just fill in what you think is best. And then we'll continue on.